We've got a couple of people who have joined us. So welcome to Write with Impact Live. I'm Glenn Leibowitz, and I've got Alan McIvor. We're both in Taipei, Taiwan at the moment. And Alan, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do at the Paul Wright Group?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in Taiwan for 12 years now, and I'm a headhunter. I've been in headhunting for 8 of those 12 years. The first 4 years were teaching English, like a lot of foreigners that live in Taiwan. So as a headhunter, I focus on helping companies with senior level placements. For me personally, I'd cover sales and marketing, e-commerce, digital, some PR as well. So mostly commercial function positions in mostly consumer facing industries. So industries like cosmetics, alcohol, tobacco, e-commerce, retail, food and beverage, cars, all of these different kinds of industries. And my clients are a mix of foreign and Taiwanese. So, for example, I would work with Cyberlink and Asus, the big Taiwanese companies, but I also work with companies like Estee Lauder and GSK and Johnson Johnson, these big multinationals. Yeah, so that's my job. It's very network heavy.
So when did you start to get active on LinkedIn, and we can move into sort of writing on LinkedIn, the topic of today's discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I was always very active on LinkedIn in terms of for my job. So for my job, let's say a company has asked me to find them a marketing manager. I would be using LinkedIn to find potential candidates for that job. And more just in general, I would be connecting with people who I thought were high caliber candidates anyway. So I was always very active on LinkedIn in that sense. From a writing content point of view, I was made the marketing manager of my company in Shanghai, and I had decided, oh, maybe I should write an article just as a tester. And I wrote and published an article, and it did really, really well. I mean, we're talking thousands of hits. I mean, maybe 60,000 views, something crazy like that. And so I had a bit of a light bulb moment where I was thinking, hold on, if I can keep this up, then I can build my personal brand with this different content. There was a gap in the middle though, because in between my Shanghai job and my current job, I worked for Robert Walters and Bola. And Robert Walters, they have their own marketing team, and actually they're very protective about what their individual consultants write on LinkedIn. And for example, I was booked to give a presentation when I was working at Robert Walters, and my boss didn't want me to do that. So it wasn't encouraged, that kind of personal brand or the content writing. But now that I'm in Paul Wright Group, I'm one of the bosses in Paul Wright Group, so I can kind of do what I want. So since I joined Paul Wright Group, I've really been putting a lot more effort into content production, yeah, into writing, trying to work on it.
That's great. To tell us, what has worked for you. I mean, I see you write very long form posts. You also write some shorter posts, but your long
Hmm.
form articles are actually extra long form. And I
Yeah.
call them mega articles. Um, it's for a couple things. First of all, it's a different approach than what I take. I typically try to
Right.
limit my word count. Sort of, I'm very conscious of people's time, and but you seem
Yeah.
to not sort of give a darn about people's time, and you just sort of write on and on and on, and yet you've
Yeah.
had a lot of success. I mean, a lot of your articles, those super long articles, have been very successful. So why is that? I'm very curious to know. I'm sure a lot of the people who have joined us, like Evans and Kaushi and Sarah and Richard,
Yeah.
are curious about, what's the secret to secret sauce.
Well, I remember when we met for a coffee and you were talking to me about your own content production, and you said you had a rule of one a week. Am I right saying that?
That's right. I used to publish one article, long form article, every week on LinkedIn for 5 years.
So I'm not trying to be, trying to kiss your butt too much, but I enjoyed our first ever coffee together, and I think that I was trying to learn from you during that coffee. So when you were talking about the content production that you focus on, I tried to listen to that, and so I did try to get more into the content production because I was enjoying it. The reason that I write really long articles, the previous two articles that I published are both over 10,000 words. So you're talking more like a dissertation.
That's like 10 of my
So,
articles. That's enough
oh my
content,
goodness.
for 2.5 months for me.
Yeah, 10, they're both 10,000 words plus. So I mean, to answer your question, I do that for selfish reasons because I really enjoy writing. So the getting started on these articles, I'm not thinking about the consumer. I'm not thinking about who's going to read these articles. I'm thinking about doing as thorough a job as I can. So if I'm tackling a topic, I would much rather tackle it properly rather than do the kind of the for consumer content marketing thing where I'm thinking, oh, people on average read for 10 minutes and then they get bored. It's like I just don't really care too much. I really enjoy writing these pieces, and so I'm really involved and I'm really passionate while I'm writing it, and so it ends up being as long as it is. I'm not gonna purposefully cut it unless I feel like it really needs some chunks taken out of it. But I mean, the long form has been doing well for me. I mean, people can't say I'm not thorough, put it that way. Yeah, or they can't come in and say, "Oh, well, you didn't cover these areas," because I probably have covered those areas.
Okay, yeah, this is hilarious. Now you wrote an article, a viral article. Holy cow! You said I thought something like 101 reasons why
Yeah,
Taiwan is such a great place to live, or something like that. And
yeah,
I don't know. I gave up after, like, reason number 662. I'm like, what the heck? I mean, I live here. I love Taiwan. And
yeah,
I agreed with like 97% of what you wrote about it, not
right,
100%.
yeah.
But I just couldn't hack. I just couldn't bear to go to 101. I still don't know what you wrote for 100 and 101 because I never got to the end.
That's a bit disappointing actually, because the final 12 reasons why Taiwan is such a great place to live are focused on why it's such a great place to live for foreigners. Because I purposefully didn't want to put those reasons near the start because I didn't want the article to be, why is Taiwan so good for foreigners? That's not what the article's purpose was. But at the same time, it was an article based on my own experience of life in Taiwan, and I am a foreigner. So the final 10
You are?
reasons were a bit more. It's true. I mean, I've been here 12 years. I guess I should be considered part Taiwanese these days. I mean, you're 20 years, right? More than that. How long
30.
have you been in Taiwan?
30
30
years.
years.
30 years.
So you came here when you were 2 years old, right? Because you're 32.
Exactly. Exactly. No,
Yeah.
my parents moved here. My father was a businessman, and I was a baby at the time.
Right.
No, I came right out of college and grad school.
Hmm. I mean, I
Yeah,
did the same. I arrived in Taiwan as a 23-year-old. I mean, you and I have similar stories in that we arrived in Taiwan and then ended up staying, right?
that's right. I
Yeah,
spent I spent 5 years in Shanghai in between. But
mm,
what we'll get back to the writing on LinkedIn. I promise everybody. Don't want to diverge too much, but what do you like about? You've been here for a while. What do you like most about Taipei? Don't list 101 reasons, please.
I really like Taiwan because it is safe and friendly, and also because I've been here so long, I've built up my life here. So I have a lot of friends here, and I have a lot of relationships, and I have a career here. So it's, you know, I probably could live in other places quite happily. I could live in Toronto or Sydney or Singapore. I wouldn't necessarily have an issue living in those places, but there's something to be said for building your life foundation up somewhere. If I was to move to Singapore now as a 36-year-old, I would have no friends there. I wouldn't be able to do my job properly because I wouldn't have any candidates or clients. I'd really be starting from zero.
Hold on,
Yeah.
Alan. You would have no friends going to Singapore.
Okay, I'm exaggerating. I would have a
Have
few friends. You're
you
right.
would have no clients. I have a very hard time believing any of that. But it sounds like you like Taiwan. I think you also have a baby who's turning one very soon. So congratulations. Happy birthday to Finn.
Yeah. Yeah, Finn's first birthday's coming up, and also the my wife is Taiwanese, right? So the idea that one of us would have to live apart from our family is true. I mean, neither of us are going to be able to. We're not going to be able to have both. I honestly just really like Taiwan. I'm very happy here. I left. I did leave. I went to Shanghai like yourself. You went for 5 years, you said. I went for 2.
Right.
So I did leave Taiwan and then I came back.
That's right.
I had a bit of an existential crisis as a 29-year-old in Shanghai because I had broken up from a previous girlfriend, and so I had the the life choice. What am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? And Taiwan came out top. I decided to come back to Taipei because I really love it here.
Right. So you had a quarter life. They call it a quarter life crisis, I think.
It depends how long I live, I guess, right?
Okay. By the way, just a little sidebar. You're Scottish, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm from Edinburgh, from Scotland.
Right. And you went to St. Andrews University?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I went to
Right.
boarding school in Canada, and then I went to St Andrews to study history and politics, history and international politics.
Okay, great, great. So let's get back to the topic, writing on LinkedIn. Tell us a little bit about your writing process. I heard you say a week or so ago when we were chatting that writing happens to be one of the most enjoyable aspects of your job. Now, your
Yeah, I
job
love
is,
it.
is you're not a writer, you're not an editor, but
No.
you're a headhunter, you're an executive search guy, and yet
Yep.
you're telling me that writing on LinkedIn is enjoyable. Why? And then after that, I'd love to hear. We would all love
Hmm.
to hear sort of what your process is. How do you come up with ideas? How
Hmm.
do you write an outline? All that kind of good stuff. But I'm getting ahead of
Yeah.
myself, and we still have some time left. So
Yeah,
shoot.
well, I mean, like, I'll be totally honest with you as well. I mean, when I'm writing articles, it is content marketing that I'm
Mm.
writing. So I'm not writing articles as a journalist. Like, the reason I'm publishing articles is to get attention for me as a headhunter. So it is technically part of my job, although I guess it's running parallel to what I actually do to make money. It's not directly making me money, but it is helping me build my personal brand. So, for example, writing an article about um, the job market in Taiwan, or about Chinese New Year bonus system, or about how foreigners can have a career in Taiwan, these are all attempts to get attention for me as an expert in the market, right? So that's why I write. That's why I produce pieces of content. But you're right to say that I enjoy it. It is something that I really love doing. I feel very passionate about it. Um, Yeah, I think you asked me about how I come up with topics as well. Um, I've
Yeah, so
written
so so let's
down,
let's talk about your writing process. That's a
yeah,
question I ask on my podcast, Right with Impact. I ask all my guests, take us into your writing studio or your office, wherever you work, and what does your writing process look like? And then we can get back
yeah,
to sort of the impact it has on building your professional brand. But let's talk about process.
yeah. I want to fire that question back at you after, actually, because I would be interested to know the answer about where
Sure.
you find topics. So for me, I I wrote down 23 or 25 potential article titles. So I kind of brainstormed article titles, and then I opened them all in separate Microsoft Word documents. So I have a folder on my computer called content, and it has a bunch of potential titles. Um, and then, I choose one that I feel like I want to give some meat to, and I would go in and I would brainstorm what I'm going to talk about. So I would write an outline and then I fire in. I'm one of these people that, um, I mean, I'm a musician as well. I believe in the kind of the flow that comes from natural creativity, that kind of like getting it out. So I actually write very quickly. Yeah. I would like to hear your answer though, Glenn. I mean, when you're thinking about topics to write about, what's your process yourself?
Sure. Well, one thing I don't trust is my memory. So what I
Mm,
do is whenever I come up with an idea, and I do come up with a lot of ideas, I try to write it down as quickly as possible. And I often use Evernote, the Evernote app, and I'll just write down an initial headline, and I file it away in a folder, blog post topics or LinkedIn blog post
Okay.
topics, and I'll write maybe one or two sentences, sometimes a couple paragraphs, sometimes the whole article. I'll punch it out
Really?
on my iPhone, maybe even lying down in bed. And
Really?
but usually I'll just get the idea down first so I don't forget it, because
Okay.
it is very likely that I'll forget it. Um, Maybe I'll use my iPhone, the built-in notes app on the iPhone, but I use Evernote. Um,
Right.
and then when I sit down to write, believe it or not, I actually copy that over to medium.com, and I write
Okay.
there because I find the writing interface to be very clean. There's no advertising,
Ah,
no profiles, no notifications, nothing. It's actually quite
yeah.
quiet. And I'm able to get into a
Okay.
state of flow, which I think was the term that you just used a couple minutes ago. I'm
Exactly.
able to concentrate, get into that state of flow or concentration, where I sort of tune out the world, and somehow that interface, like I said, just the text on the blank screen with nothing else, no clutter, allows me to sort of get my words out on the screen on the page more
Right.
easily, and then I transfer it over to LinkedIn. And
Okay.
why do I not write on LinkedIn? Because I've had too many situations where the server did not work,
Yeah.
and it would forget the version, and I would lose my work, or it would
Right.
be erased entirely, and that has happened too many times, a couple of times. So I
Yeah.
decided, not don't my suggestion is write on LinkedIn, publish on LinkedIn, but don't write on LinkedIn. I know that sounds
Yeah.
counterintuitive. I don't know about you.
Yeah, for sure. I would never write something directly to LinkedIn. Yeah, I would keep it a Microsoft Word. I mean, to go back to the flow question, I write articles in terms of the chunk, the meat of the article. I write it way faster than the editing process. So sometimes an article will take me 2 hours or 3 hours to write and then 5 days to edit. Like the editing process is a lot slower for me than the getting it out kind of stage. How about for you? What would you say is your normal?
That's incredible. No, it's incredible to hear. I'm glad, I do spend a lot of time editing. What's the sort of the ratio? Um, I would say it's hard to say. I've never really calculated it, but it's almost even. It's almost 50-50, where I'll
Oh,
spend,
interesting.
a lot of time writing, but then equal time editing. Um, uh, Maybe a little bit more, sometimes 60% of the time editing. I haven't really tracked that
Hmm.
scientifically, but I definitely do edit rigorously. And that's something that I recommend all writers do, is because I edit my
Yeah.
work. I don't hand it over to anybody else. I don't hire somebody to edit.
Hmm.
I have edited hundreds of articles for other people,
Okay.
and but when it comes to my own writing, I edit my own writing. So writing is rewriting. That's what some people have said, some
Right.
writers have said, and that's absolutely true. But I think it's very encouraging that you're able to get your thoughts down on the page quickly. It sounds like you're able to do that in a fairly uninhibited way. I'd be curious
Yeah,
to know
definitely.
what you're consuming at the time when you do that. If anything interesting, let us know. I'm just joking, but a cup
Yeah,
of
because
tea.
if you yeah, a cup
Yeah,
of tea, a cup of
yeah,
coffee. Because I think if you're writing something out and you're flowing and you're passionate about it and you're filled with that kind of creative buzz that you get, if you get bogged down in researching a particular topic or the wording of a sentence, you're going to ruin the flow. I think it's much better to get the whole thing out, paragraph, 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 and then come back to the nitty gritty of, or which word should I use? Did
right.
I phrase that sentence properly? Should I put a comma here? That I think that it interrupts the flow if you. I think it should be a separate mind frame. I mean, Ernest Hemingway, what was it? He used to write drunk, edit sober, right? It's the same kind of idea, although I'm not necessarily talking about or narcotics, but the idea of, writing in one state, editing in another, I would support.
That's a good way to paraphrase that in a very professional, sort of sober way. Write in one state, edit in another. And by the way, I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I'm not sure if it's true that he would edit sober. But I also know he did have a professional editor that he worked with for many years. Um,
It
So
definitely helps.
yeah. So tell us about what else? I mean, I think you do include images. How do you find images? What do you do? Do you just search on your iPhone and you just sort of, send it over to your, by the way, what do you, are you
Yeah,
writing Word, right?
in Microsoft Word. So I
Right.
only put in the images once I'm publishing on LinkedIn.
Right.
That's a difficult one because ideally I'd want to use my own images, which are kind of photos that I've taken on my phone, but those aren't always relevant or the right kind of pixel quality. I made the mistake recently. So my latest article was called "How to Have a Long and Successful Career in Taiwan as a Foreigner." And the photo, because you need a headline photo, you need a kind of, what's it called, a front page photo. And I had put a photo from a golf tournament where the European team had won. So it's 9 foreigners with a kind of cup. And then I realized that the photo was 9 white guys in Taiwan, and I was thinking, is this really the image that I want to lead with? I just, because I've been attacked online before, and I was thinking, I don't know if I want to. I think I'm setting myself up here. So I changed it. I changed it for a stock photo of Taipei, a really nice kind of sunset photo of Taipei, which I think in hindsight was a better idea.
Right.
How about you? Do you ever add images?
Oh no, absolutely. And I use unsplash.com. So here's a little pro tip. It's free.
Okay.
As long as you attribute the author, you give credit to the the photographer, not the author. There's a little link there. You just click the link and you can copy that over to your article. So I've used unsplash.com for many, many years. Occasionally I'll use Shutterstock, which does cost, and occasionally I'll use Getty Images. But for the most part, I've used unsplash.com. And then, of course, for some of the more personal articles, I try to dig into my photo album that my mother put
Right.
together for me several years ago when I visited her in Florida. She
Uh-huh.
put together a really great album of photos when I was a kid, growing up fishing and doing all kinds of crazy, silly
Oh,
things. And I'll go in and I'll just sort of, instead of scanning them in a very sophisticated manner, I'll just take my iPhone, I'll just take a photo of the photo,
yeah, right.
which
Interesting.
that's my quick hack for scanning photos. So I do that intentionally. I use those personal photos intentionally. Maybe it's a little bit of oversharing of my
Mm,
past and myself, but I found that actually some of those articles where I talk about, real stories of me growing up or maybe in school or my
right.
earlier days in work, messing up, falling on my face,
Mm,
actually resonate a little bit more with readers.
mm-hmm.
The more the personal stories, even if I'm offering practical advice, sort of the 5 or 6
Right.
things you need to do to, be a better writer or whatever, I try to start off with a personal anecdote, a personal story. Uh,
Definitely. Me
and
too.
it just, maybe it's my way of overcoming writer's block. Maybe it's my way of just getting started. I'm just able to, just recall something that happened to me a long time ago. I don't know about you.
I try and mix a lot of my personal story in with the article. I think it's about authenticity. I mean, there's nothing more boring than reading a content piece that is all business. And I feel the same about
Right.
conversations in my job. Like, if you think that a job interview should be all business, oh, what did you do in this job? What was your responsibilities? Why did you leave the company? What was your salary at the time? What was your sales record? If you think a job interview should be all business, then I think you kind of have the wrong end of the stick. There needs to be the personal mixed in with the expertise. I think that's what makes the articles more readable. And I was speaking to my one of my best friends, Christine Orchard, about this topic, and she said, I think what is really nice about your articles, Alan, is that they feel really authentic. They feel like you get to know you as you're reading the article, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that's something I'm very proud of. It's something that I want to keep working on. What about you, Glenn? What would you feel about that topic?
No, absolutely. I could talk quite a bit about this. I think if you look back, I did an inventory of all my articles. Well, half of my articles recently. I did a spreadsheet and I listed out all the titles and topics, and a lot of them um, are very, kick off. I start off with very personal stories, and some of them, and then some of the the lessons I learned from that. For example,
Yeah.
one of my articles many years ago I wrote about when I was a kid, and I was fascinated with garbage men, and I really wanted to be a garbage man. And
Uh-huh.
my father, we were going camping, and we were leaving the campground, and there was a camper that my father was driving with my mother and my sister and my
Hmm.
brother in the camper. But I stood on the ledge
Uh-huh.
of the camper on the back. Nobody knew I was outside standing on the ledge of the camper as my father was driving away at 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. And like, why did I talk about that strange story where I thought I
Uh-huh.
was almost going to get seriously injured as a kid?
Wow.
Because I was talking about the lesson learned was, the lesson I was trying to get across was don't assume anything. So my family
Right.
assumed that I was inside the camper somewhere, either in the truck part or in the camper part. But I was actually in neither. I was actually outside on the
Oh my
ledge, holding
goodness.
on for dear life.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and for some reason, I thought that would be interesting to other people on LinkedIn. And for some reason,
Oh my
a lot of
goodness.
people thought that was odd, but
Yeah.
interesting enough that they read it and commented on it and shared it. There was another article, a very personal article I shared on LinkedIn years ago around the time my parents bought me my first computer. It was an Apple II Plus, and
Mm.
I'll never forget that experience. I went into the store looking for the Atari. It was called the Atari,
Okay.
and
Uh-huh.
somehow I fell in love with the Apple II Plus. This
Uh-huh.
is in get this 1981,
It's
and my
before I
mother
was
pulled
born.
out. Exactly. Thanks for emphasizing that. My mother pulled out a bunch of bonds, like U.S. Treasury bonds, and she cashed them in. I guess she was able to pay with that. I don't know how, why the store accepted it. I
Mhm.
guess they were desperate for our money, but she took out all of these bonds that she had been saving so that she could buy me a computer. So, and I titled that. I put article. This is why Apple owes my mom a huge thank you today, or something like that. And that was my first quote viral article on
Yeah,
LinkedIn back in 2014.
that's awesome. I mean, you've had a few articles go viral. I mean, are there any articles that have gone really viral? I mean, are there any specific articles that have done really, really well in terms of the metrics?
Yes. So one of them is it, you don't have to have a fancy title or a corner office to be a leader.
Ah, I
And
like it.
so for some
Yeah.
reason that one just went bananas, and I think it has
Okay.
16,000 likes or something like that.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I challenge you, Alan McIvor, to match those metrics
Done.
on LinkedIn. But no, that was a
Okay,
long
I'll
time. That was
try.
a long time ago when it was a little bit easier to get noticed on LinkedIn. But one thing I think we could talk about is it is getting harder. There are a lot more people, a lot more members on LinkedIn. I think over
Hmm.
750, 760 million by now. But it is feeling like it's getting more crowded and noisy, and more difficult to sort of get attention, the right kind of attention and engagement.
Hmm.
What do you suggest people on LinkedIn do to overcome this challenge and to sort of stand out? Besides talking about
Yeah.
very personal stories all the time, I think that that's interesting. Or sharing advice. How do you break through this noise?
Yeah, I mean, uh, th- I'll answer a part of that question first because I think what we were talking about mixing the personal stories in, I'm also talking about areas where I'm an expert, right? I'm not just sharing personal stories. I'm sharing personal stories mixed in with a topic that I feel like I'm qualified to discuss. I know a lot about these topics that I'm writing about, which is another thing that we should probably have addressed. And if you're producing content, you want to be producing content that you are very comfortable talking about. I think the reason a few of my articles have done well is because the feedback is like, wow, you really know what you're talking about. And actually, I've binned two articles. So I have two articles that I've fully written out that I haven't published because I had a feeling that I just wasn't quite there. One of the articles, I can just tell you, one of the articles is called Doing Favors in Business. And it was talking about how being a nice person and being helpful in business and being a bit softer than that kind of hard edge sales personality that used to be very highly valued. I was saying that actually that's better for your long term career. And I do still support the argument, although I felt like I didn't quite know enough about what I was talking about. So I wrote out the full article, but I never published it. I binned it. Yeah. Um, yeah. So sorry, I'll try and answer the other question as well. It's about gaining attention on LinkedIn. I'm still working that out myself, I think. One thing I've definitely noticed though is that because I'm publishing articles on LinkedIn, so these are LinkedIn original pieces. It's not like I'm copy pasting from medium.com. These are articles that are published on LinkedIn first and foremost. The algorithm has started to favor my other posts. So because I've been publishing articles on LinkedIn and because I've had so much engagement with some of my other posts, LinkedIn has decided that my posts deserved boosting. So anything I post these days gets thousands and thousands of hits. I mean, I posted a photo of me with my son when he was born. I think I got 200,000 hits.
Oh,
But even the average, as a headhunter, I'm working on different jobs. So let's say I post something that says, I'm looking for digital marketing manager in alcohol industry. I want a sales director for high tech. I want an e-commerce manager cross border. Even these posts are getting 50, 60,000 hits. So I think don't post too often would be an answer. I think try and keep things topical. Uh, you have to look at the engagement that you're getting with different posts as well, and then start to favor the stuff that's getting more hits metric analytics wise, and start to learn from the lessons of the posts that don't do as well. How about yourself? What would you say in terms of, because I know your posts used to be boosted very heavily by LinkedIn themselves, right?
that's right. That's a good point. So things have changed quite a bit on LinkedIn. In the past, the editors, they call them internally human editors. The human
Right.
editors had the ability to, on the back end, on the content management system, they could promote articles. I've been told that they no longer have that ability.
Okay.
And it's really up to the algorithm. They call it the algo,
Okay.
and some other factors. So it's actually becoming harder to get sort of the attention of the algorithm. I So that's one big change. I think a couple ways around that. One is to post articles directly in your feed rather than
Mm,
as long form articles. I used to be a big advocate. I'm still a strong advocate of publishing what you call sort of the longer form articles on your blog for many
yeah.
reasons, because they're sticky. They're there on your, sort of linked to your profile. They're sometimes hard to find, but they're
Yeah.
there, and they're also searchable within it, LinkedIn, the search engine on LinkedIn, and sometimes they get indexed. Actually, several times get indexed on Google.
All right.
So yeah,
Right.
so there you can people can find your articles via Google. That's one reason why I suggest publishing on your blog. That said, I found increasingly more traction with my articles when I post them directly in the feed, and I believe they've lengthened the word count for that, which is very, very helpful. You
Okay.
cannot. It's you can of course post photos or videos along with that text,
Yeah.
and I've just found that there's a lot more, traction with some of those. I notice you still continue to publish the long form articles and do very well with those, which is great. So you seem to be sort of hacking the algorithm or doing something right. But
But
I
I haven't
found that
tried what you suggested either. I haven't
yeah.
tried that.
And there's a word count limit. You can't publish an infinitely long article in your feed, so it
Right.
forces you to be more concise. But
Hmm.
I've what I've tested is publishing both the same content as a long form article and in the feed. I have to cut it down a bit, and it looks different. Of course, it doesn't look as
Yeah.
nicely formatted, but I've found that that just gets more exposure for essentially the same content.
That's interesting. I mean, one of the lessons that I tried to learn from you from our first coffee together was that, you also have to focus on being quite productive or quite prolific with your output. Because I think if you're just to publish an article and then rest on your laurels, think, oh, I wrote an article and did really well, I think you're kind of missing the point. It's about consistently producing content that gets attention, and then that is what is kind of helping you. So, I mean, to go back to the authenticity point that I made before as well, a lot of the things that I've posted, not the content, but a lot of the different comments that I've posted on the LinkedIn feed um, have again been quite authentic things that I have been happening in my career. So I posted a congratulations message to my colleague Vicky when she got promoted, and it was short. It was a few paragraphs, and I was saying I want to take a quick moment to thank my colleague Vicky for everything. She got promoted recently, and it's thoroughly deserved. She's a fantastic colleague. She's a fantastic headhunter, and I wish her nothing but success. And that had a lot of hits, basically, because I think people thought that was quite sweet that I would take the time to appreciate my colleague in a way that's not really done in Taiwan. I don't think I think that kind of sentiment's quite American, almost, that kind of like very public display of affection. It's not very common in Taiwan.
It's not very Scottish, in other words.
Yeah, not very Scottish either. Yeah, and then the other thing that I had, the other comment that I had that did really well was a really sad story. It was about a client of mine who had died from cancer, and I had posted something saying, I feel really upset about this situation, and I understand that business relationships are often not seen in the same way that a lover would be, or a best friend would be, but I feel really hurt. I feel really sad about what's just happened. And I posted something really sincere about the death of one of my clients, and that did really well in terms of metrics as well, because I think, again, like congratulating my colleague, I think it was something that was quite sweet and quite authentic. Yeah.
It is. I wonder if we could, if I could ask you, a lot of people tell me that they want to write on LinkedIn, and I know I love to see when people start doing it, and
Yeah.
then they get hooked. You could see they get hooked, like we were hooked, a while
Like
ago.
us. Yeah.
And however, there's a lot of talented people out there, um, and for whatever reason, they just, maybe they feel awkward or shy, or
Mm,
they have a little bit of what you call it imposter syndrome. Whatever the reason is,
right.
maybe they think mistakenly that they're not a good writer. What would you suggest to them to get started, to sort of break through those essentially mental barriers? It's really within, I would say, within themselves, and I've experienced
Yeah.
that over the years, off and on. I certainly experienced it before I got started writing. Used to think about writing and blogging for a good year or so, and I used to
Right.
sort of browse WordPress blog themes and anything other than actually writing for about a
Yeah.
year before I
Right.
actually started to write and publish and put myself out there in a very big way.
Yeah.
What do you suggest people do to just get started?
Yeah. I mean, I did the same with music. I'm a musician, and I, played cover songs for most of my life. And then when I started writing my own songs, it was like all of these songs just came out of me. I was incredibly prolific over a couple of years. I would say the same thing with writing content. Maybe do the same thing that I did. Maybe write down 10 ideas about topics that you can write about, and then choose the one that you feel most passionate about, or that you feel that you know the best, and then just do it, right? Just get it out. Like, sit down and write it out. I mean, maybe it won't be particularly good the first time, but everyone's got a growing trajectory. The recent article that I published was the only one I've self-edited as well, completely self-edited. So, I would say, especially for your first articles, don't be afraid to ask friends to give you some feedback before you publish, because there's no harm in sending it out to a few people that you know well, who are smart. They're good editors, and get their feedback. You don't need to ask them to be completely brutally honest, but at least have a go at the grammar. Yeah, because you don't really want to write your first article and then have a friend say it's not interesting. Although, if I was going to share a quick story, one of my boss and my current company, Jay, he saw that I was getting quite a lot of buzz from content production and thought, oh, I want to do that too. And he had to go at writing an article, and it it wasn't very sincere. It ended up being a it ended up being more like that kind of marketing spiel for our company. So, when I write articles, I am trying to include Paul Wright Group in the article at some point, but I'm not forcing it down people's throats. And his article ended up being about how Paul Wright Group are good because they pay attention to clients' needs and candidates. It ended up being that more like that marketing spiel. And I was saying, maybe don't do that. What you should do is write about what you know about, which is the legal market in Taiwan. So write about lawyers in Taiwan, and then slyly put in references to our company a couple of times. Like, that is good content marketing.
I like how you emphasize the word slyly.
Slyly, yeah, because you don't want people
Oh,
reading the article to think, oh, he's just selling his company. Maybe
right,
I am just selling my company, but that shouldn't be
right.
what people feel.
No, absolutely. No, I was just joking, but I think that's
Mm,
absolutely right. I think, by the way, you don't even have to mention your company name until the very end. You
right.
could say, I represent such and such a company. I think that's enough for people to know to draw the association.
Yeah.
Um, what about headlines? How do you come? How do you write a really good headline that's going to make people want to click and read your article? Because headlines are really important.
Yeah, and I've gone back and changed headlines because the content of the article ended up not reflecting the headline properly. It's a tough one. I think you have to go a bit with instinct. You have to brainstorm a little bit. It doesn't hurt to throw a few ideas at the wall. I mean, you are obviously a very creative person because you're in a creative industry, and I am too. I'm very naturally creative. Like, whether it's music or writing articles, or I really enjoy that creative endeavor. I don't know how it would be for somebody who it didn't come as naturally for. If if maybe some of the advice I'm giving about flow and creativity and just getting it out there, I don't know if that would be as easy for everyone listening. So maybe there might be different things that you can do to brainstorm if it doesn't come as naturally for you. But I think practice is always going to help.
Practice, definitely. I think reading other people's content, and observing, just analyzing it very carefully. Looking at how they write their headlines, and you don't have to copy or imitate
Yeah,
exactly. Another thing is, I
yeah.
found, I think your advice to ask for feedback on the article is excellent. I think especially if you're just starting out. And I remember uh, in the first year or two, or even beyond that, I would take my headline, for example, and show it to
Uh-huh.
my son, my
Okay.
teenage son at the time, and then even sometimes my daughter, who's 6 years younger than my son. So I
Okay.
just wanted to get that sort of quick test to see, although they weren't necessarily my target audience,
Right.
they were available, they were free, and they gave me sort of their honest reaction. That's what I was looking for. Is their honest, like, Dad, that headline
Right.
really sucks. You should,
Right.
and I would do a little A/B testing. I would give them a couple options and ask them, maybe three or four options, and say which one
Yeah.
sounds good. And my son would say, well, this one sounds like clickbait, and the
Mm,
and the other one,
mm.
maybe this one sounds good. So I get that honest feedback from my kids once in a
Can I
while.
ask your opinion? So if you had the choice of the kind of the metaphor title, or the it is what it says on the tin title, which one would you go for?
Tin. It sounds very Scottish or British. It says on the
Tin. It
yeah.
does what it says on the tin.
On the packaging. Okay, got it.
On
I
the
just
package.
translated that into American English, the standard for English. But anyway, um, I would say that's a very good question. I know exactly what you're
Yeah.
saying. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
You ready? I
I am.
actually, I concluded that I'd rather be clear over clever.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
clarity over cleverness, because I for too many very often I would come up with a clever headline,
Uh-huh.
and I just felt like it was maybe a little bit too obscure, like not clear enough. Like, what
Yeah.
exactly is in this art? What is this article about? So I actually tended to, sometimes I would publish those, what I thought were clever headlines, but typically I
Hmm.
would try to be very, very clear. What are the
I would, yeah,
what is this article promising to offer and deliver in terms of some sort of information or value or insight, and try to pack
yeah.
that into the headline if I can. So being
Yeah,
clear.
I think I would agree with you. The most recent article that I published, like I said, it was called "How to Have a Long and Successful Career in Taiwan as a Foreigner." It's super simple and super easy. Although a previous article that I published, I called um, the job market for foreign talent in Taiwan, the rough with the smooth, or I called it the rough with the smooth. So again, I was maybe stepping a little bit more onto the metaphor side. Um, but yeah, my major fear would be that if you come up with the kind of the clever metaphor title, people aren't going to read it. But I think you have to hook people in. It has to be an article that people think, oh, I want to know the answer to that question. I want to know the answer to that title.
Right.
Um, so I think as well, yeah, being too clever is probably not advisable.
I do like to play with language though, and I have to admit I like alliteration, sort of, words that start with the same letter.
Yeah.
So I think I had an article years ago, the pleasures and perils of expat life or something like
Oh,
that.
I like that. Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I liked the rough with the smooth because I explained it in the first paragraph. I said
yeah,
the reason why I say the rough with the smooth is not saying that foreigners are rough necessarily. I'm alluding to the difficult truth about the job market in Taiwan, that Taiwan is fantastic, but the job prospects are quite bad. So you have to accept the rough with the smooth. And I felt that was a really nice, I don't know, I like that. I was a fan of how that read and how that played out and how it flowed into the content of the article.
right. We're sort of getting to the hour. If anyone wants to ask a question, please do. Otherwise, we'll just continue until we wrap this up. But one other topic we didn't cover. We've been talking a lot about content writing.
Yeah,
Something a little bit more nitty gritty practical before we end here is around outreach
right.
messages. I don't know, how do you describe it, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to
I
hand this
know.
over to
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we probably should have got onto this topic a little bit earlier because it is really important and it's probably more relevant to the average person. So, what we're talking about is on LinkedIn, you connect with somebody and then let's say they've accepted or you just are cold messaging them. So, how does writing quality affect the your career in that sense? Like, how do you get good feedback and good replies from these cold messages to new connections? So, to answer that topic or to answer my own question, I think that you have to um, can't come in too hot, can't come in too cold. So, too cold would be something like nice to connect, hope you're well, right? That would be too cold, and then too hot would be a real 10 paragraphs and this huge long message. Too hot, too cold, both don't work. Those are both bad ideas. I think what has worked for me most of the time, and I think I'm up to almost 24,000 LinkedIn connections, so I have a lot of experience with cold messaging new connections, and I have learned what works and what doesn't. So I think for me, I would go with the simple thanks for connecting, hope you're doing well. And then I would probably give a bit of an introduction to who I was because they haven't necessarily clicked on your profile. So, my name's Alan McIvor. I'm a headhunter in Taipei. And then I would try and find some kind of mutual um, connection. So, not a person, I'm talking about a thing. So, if they were based in Taipei, I'd maybe say, oh, I'm also based in Taipei. Or let's say they went to a university in the UK. I'd say, oh, I saw you lived in Exeter. I'm from Edinburgh myself, although I've been in Taipei for the past 12 years. Some hook, some little hook Or let's say they used to work for a company that I used to work for. Oh, I see we both used to work for this company. Some kind of personal connection. And then I would explain what I wanted. So as a headhunter, often I'm saying something like, I'm a headhunter in Taipei focused on marketing positions. If you ever wanted to have a chat, please let me know. Or if I wanted to be a bit more aggressive, I would say something like, I think you have a really good profile. I'm a headhunter focused on marketing recruitment. It would be great if I could buy you a coffee sometime, or if you're too busy, I'd love to give you a phone call. Would you be free next week at some point? Something a bit more direct and actually asking. And then the old kind of best regards, Alan. How about you? Let's throw the cold messaging question on you. What would you say has worked for you in the past, and what would you say are the pitfalls?
Right. I think I see a lot of people reach out to me um, looking for something, and what I would suggest is just make the connection first,
Okay. Okay.
and before making the ask. And maybe
Right.
maybe it's just, if you need to do that because you have limited time and you have, sort of your business goals to meet, to put it
Mm-hmm.
lightly. I can understand that, but I think I get people, maybe young people, looking to pick my brain for a half hour when I
Right.
don't really have a half hour for, to even cover sort of the essential things that I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
So I do, in principle, want to be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but it is, I do have limited time, just like anybody else. And however, I can be helpful in various ways. But first, just you know, make the connection first. Maybe let me get to know you first a little bit, and then just maybe take a look at what I'm all about, and then
Yeah.
maybe at some point. So what I do, let me just tell you what I do. I actually spend a lot of time getting to know people on LinkedIn before I make any
Okay.
kind of ask.
Okay.
And a lot of
Okay.
time could be anywhere from months to years.
Right. Well.
I actually spend a lot of time doing that because, you know, maybe in the back of my mind, I would love to say interview them for my podcast someday, but I don't ask that right away. I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
first, I do something. I like one of their articles, or I share it, or I send them
Mm-hmm.
a personal note about something that I think might be of interest. And, I just let that evolve naturally before I make any kind of request or ask. Of course, eventually I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't get anything done. I have to
Yeah.
ask. And by the way, I strongly recommend that you do ask and have the
Mm-hmm.
courage to
Mm-hmm.
ask. In fact, I wrote an article about this. I shared a video of Steve Jobs when he asked for his first job. He got a job at Hewlett Packard when he was a boy,
Okay.
because he called up Bob Hewlett,
Right.
Hewlett, the founder, and asked for a device, a frequency counter,
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up getting a job out of that. So definitely ask. Have the courage to ask. I'm not saying don't do that, but just do it at the right, when you've built some sort of connection with somebody on LinkedIn, not
Yeah,
right
and you
off the
want to.
bat.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's great advice, and but you also you want to keep the conversation going, right? Because if you take the Glenn approach and you think, okay, I'm going to have some dialogue with this person first before I ask anything, you need to make sure that there is dialogue happening. So you need to make sure that they're replying to your messages. So a
Right.
simple, like I said, too hot, too cold, both doesn't work, because if you do the "How are you," you're probably not going to get any kind of reply, right? Um, so yeah, you do. I think, because if I was to be really aggressive with my job, what I would do is say, "Oh, I'm hiring this position. Are you interested? Here's the job description." That's too hot. That's too aggressive. But saying something like, "I'm a headhunter in Taipei, always open for a chat." That's maybe somewhere in the middle, because you're extending the olive branch, but you're not forcing them to give you a time to speak to you next week. You're kind of somewhere in the middle. And then if you really need to make contact with that person, then you can maybe come back to them or write down a note to follow up the next week. Because if you don't write down a note to follow up, you'll probably forget.
Right. Well, thanks for Alan, for all of your excellent wisdom that you've shared with us today. I think we're getting up to the end of the hour that we promised everybody. Thank you for bearing with us with our rambles,
Yeah, right.
digressions, and but thanks for bearing with us. And do follow Alan on LinkedIn, of course. And if you have a moment, follow me as well, Glenn Leibowitz. I'll make this will be available on my account,
Yeah,
and I'll also publish it elsewhere, probably on my podcast. So
great.
thanks again, Alan. It was
Thanks,
fun
Glenn.
and a pleasure to talk to you today. And
Always. My
keep
pleasure.
writing, by the way. Don't give up. I want to see more articles from you. And I don't know why you threw your articles in the bin. I think that's a mistake. You should never do that. Just definitely put it out there. Don't be afraid to put it out there.
We can discuss this later. Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Glenn. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.